Moiz, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you, and I'm pumped. I think it's been the last couple of years I've wanted to have you on the show, and it's finally worked out. So welcome.
Thanks. Super excited to be here.
You know, it's funny. I remember meeting you like 5 years ago. I don't know if you remember at Ezra's event.
Definitely remember. Yeah, you were doing a presentation on like emails, I think.
Yes, I think it was email, triggered emails. And I remember you gave me your card, and I had your card sitting around for like on my desk for like 3 years. And then I was like, then I saw like a headline. It was like, oh, Native sold for like $100 million. And I was like, I put the two and two together. I was like, wait, I met him 3 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago. And then boom, he sells his company for one of the more visible exits in our industry, which is super, super cool. And something that I know I want to talk to you a lot about. You got a lot of stuff going on. You're kind of a mover and a shaker. I was doing a lot of research for this episode. One of the things I didn't know before doing research for the episode is that both you and your brother have built businesses and sold businesses for a sizable amount. What was in the water when you were growing up that led you guys both to be entrepreneurs?
Yeah, my father is 83 years old, and he has never for 1 second had a paycheck. He's never worked for anybody else. And my brother tells a story about how he graduated undergrad as a computer engineer, went to work for Microsoft, called my father his first day at work and was like, Dad, this is my office phone. This was back in 2002. He's like, this is my office phone number. Give me a call here. You can call me at my office. And my father told him, he's like, that's great that you've got an office and you're like a professional now. But I think you should quit your job today and start your own business. And it was his first day at Microsoft. And so I feel like there's, I think a lot of families have a lot of inertia pushing you against entrepreneurship and like pushing you towards a bunch of safety. In my family, it was a lot of the opposite, a lot of pressure pushing you towards that, towards entrepreneurship. I'm not sure it was in the water, but there was a lot of like our dining room table these days is like a boardroom meeting. People are like, what's your revenue look like? What do gross margins look like? I see things are down from last month. What happened? It's an interesting family dynamic.
So when you chose to go to law school, were you thinking entrepreneurship down the road? Was this a path? Were you thinking lawyer? What was going on there, especially given the pressure you had from the family?
Sure. I was thinking I really enjoyed going to law school. I really enjoyed everything about that and was really thinking that it would be my career. I was a lawyer for 2.5 years. It's not like I quit the day after I started. I really enjoyed even being a lawyer. It was a lot of fun for me. But it was less, there was less of a meritocracy than I expected. If you're a second year associate as a lawyer, you're a second year associate. It doesn't matter how hard you work or what your intelligence is like. They're going to give you the same work as every other second year. And there's far less limited upside when it comes to being a lawyer. Like your salary working for somebody else. If you work for 10 years, you can make partner. And for me, I wanted a little bit more sink or swim by my own wits. And so that's what drove me away.
I want to fast forward then a little bit. I know because I want to get back into definitely sure. Everyone's going to ask a bunch of questions about Native, but I want to fast forward to post sale to Procter Gamble.
Yeah.
You now are working in arguably like one of the largest, biggest companies out there with, I'm sure, not entrepreneurial. How did that feel working there and working with them, and how long did it last? And what was that experience like for you?
Sure. So the business was independent for about 2.5 years, and then I stayed on for another 2.5 years within P&G. And so I had like an equal amount of time or an equal experience, at least in terms of length of time, when it came to being an independent company versus a P&G employee. And it's really, really surprising at like what P&G is good at and what they're terrible at. Like, the way they look, Pampers is a $10 billion a year brand.
Insane.
if you bought every single direct to consumer startup that exists in e-commerce, I don't think you'd have a single Pampers. And so yeah, there is like a lot of red tape and a lot of meetings. But when you're running a $10 billion a year brand, you probably don't want a summer intern from college posting on your Instagram account unfettered. You want a little bit of that red tape. And to be honest, as Native grew past $100 million, like there wasn't red tape, but there was certainly more processes involved than when we were a $20 million business. And it was sort of like anybody could walk up to my desk at any time and get something done. Like, as we grew the business, there was more process within our own internal culture. I guess what's most surprising to me about P&G is that people I thought when I walked into P&G, like it'd be this massive corporation and a bunch of people would be able to hide and do really poor work and no one would care because they're sort of employees there. I would imagine like if you're an employee of, I don't really know what it's like at Facebook or Google, but I imagine there's places to hide where you're like, look, I don't want to work really hard and I'm going to join this team, and people don't care about the team because it's not revenue generating or something to that effect. At P&G, it wasn't like that. Everyone was actually working really hard and no one was able to hide. And that was surprising. Like people were responding to my emails at 10 p.m. And I was like, wow, I thought you guys would be out of the office at 5. And that wasn't the case. These guys are on top of their game.
Wow. That's surprising. That's surprising. You don't think about that at that large of a level, right?
Yeah.
It's really fascinating to get kind of an inside look at two very different things, right? I had a conversation. My friend Mike Danner called me. He's been at Ancient Nutrition for a long time, Dr. Axe. Yeah. And we were talking about, this is like a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. We were talking and he was like, the biggest difference as we've gotten bigger, he's like, I thought it was going to be like more exciting, the marketing that we could do, but it's actually the exact opposite. It's like, now we're like, okay, can we get this through like our legal team? Can we get this through? We need to be much safer.
Sure.
And that was surprising, right? That was surprising. And I think as you go up, what you're talking about with P&G, it's like on a whole nother level.
Yeah, I mean, they've got, probably one of the world's 1,000 largest law firms internally within this organization. When you're a startup and you have no revenue, you can swing at every pitch and swing really hard because you've got nothing to lose. And as you grow and become more of a target for, attorneys who are looking to sue you for something that like really doesn't matter or like was not important, you've got to be a lot more careful. And so there was definitely more of that, but it wasn't so much like, generally speaking, P&G left us pretty independent. Like we had our own office in San Francisco. I was in Cincinnati a bit. They were in San Francisco a bit, but we were still pretty independent. It wasn't like they were, looking over our shoulder as much as they could have, certainly. Like, when we joined P&G, our company was 8 people and P&G was probably, hundreds of thousands of people. It was really easy for them to inundate us. And I thought like the guy who was in charge of the deodorant category at the time did a fantastic job at sort of playing, being a bodyguard. Like, when the acquisition was announced, people from P&G linked in me and they're like, where are you buying your coconut oil? I bet I can save you a few cents per gallon. And he's like, don't do that. Like, don't get that involved. There's 8 people here. If we start like, sort of aiming to save that 8 cents a gallon on coconut oil, we're going to inundate them with the minutia that P&G can be a part of. And so they did a great job of understanding who they were, understanding who we were, and like giving us the room to do what we were doing well. While at the same time, teaching us about how to sell at Target, how to sell into Walmart. And so I was really appreciative of that. Like, I find that my learning curve sort of starts to plateau after a couple years. And, we had been at Native a couple years before we sold the business. And as soon as we sold the business, that learning curve really steepened again, because I was like, oh, wow, this is how a company that has a $300 billion market cap would do things. And that was really interesting.
That's really cool. Well, I want to dive into something that I think you might be the only person on the planet who's done this. I was listening to another interview as I was preparing, and you were talking about A/B testing deodorant.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think you might be the only person on the planet who has A/B tested deodorant. How on earth did you pull that off? And Yeah, what did that even look like? Because I think one of the things that's been interesting when I've ever listened to your story anywhere else or read about it is like the kind of like hacker mentality of like test things,
Sure.
and like really like testing things, A/B testing deodorant. What did that look like? How did you pull that off?
Yeah, got a great story here. So, because there were like three levels of this A/B testing. The first level was us basically sending out different deodorants that didn't have ingredient lists to our best customers early on in the business, within the first year of the business. We're like, hey, look, we understand that our product needs work. We're working on it. Here are two different formulas. Do you like one of these formulas more than the other? And that's how it started. And, it was on a scale of like, 10 people at a time. Based on their feedback, we made product decisions and improved the product. Then we continued to do that moving forward. Like, after 10 people at a time, we started doing hundreds, then thousands. And then we'd test ridiculous things where we're like, look, let's test the size of a baking soda particle. Like, how many nanometers should it be for the best customer experience? And what we would do is we'd say, okay, here's a pool of like, when you have scale, you have a lot more ability to do this. We're like, here are 10,000 customers. They're all first time customers and they've all purchased coconut and vanilla. Let's separate them into two groups of 5,000, send out a different formula to each of them. And then, 6 weeks later, we'll start monitoring their reviews on our site. Like who has a higher average review, the people who got, larger baking soda sized particles or the people who got smaller baking soda sized particles. And within 6 weeks, we have a good idea of like, is this going to be important? Is this not going to be important? And if it is important, what's going to win? And then within 12 weeks, people put their money where their mouth is and they've bought native coconut and vanilla again, or they haven't. And then we can say, you know what, the smaller baking soda sized particle won. Let's move that into our formula all over the place. So we did that a bunch. Ironically, what happened is when we joined P&G, P&G's like, look, we have a better natural deodorant formula than Native has. And we've been working on it for some time. And there's a bunch of like PhDs that have worked on this. And this is our senior deodorant chemist. And he's like, I guarantee the formula we have is going to be better than the formula you have. And it was right at the time we were launching into Target. And so what we said is like, look, you're P&G and, you've got $1 billion R&D, like several $1 billion R&D budget. Our R&D budget is several $100s. So your orders of magnitude larger than us. So let's do this. So when we sold into Target, we initially sold like a variant of our product, like a new iteration of our product that had never been tested online before, but which P&G was like, this is going to win. So we started selling that in stores. And then on our own site, we actually ran the same A/B test. We did, we split it up, and I think we used like 20,000 different people, and 10,000 people got one variant, and 10,000 people got the P&G variant, 10,000 people got the original native formula. Within 6 weeks, it was clear that the native formula was absolutely destroying the P&G formula. Like the P&G formula was awful. And we're like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
We're a bunch of bumpkins over here. There's, 8 of us. We don't know anything. We're holding this company up by duct tape. And here comes the world's largest CPG company, and they got their formula can be worse than our formula. You have billions of dollars. What are you guys doing over there? And so then what we did is we, went back to our original formula. We soft converted the deodorants at Target, and we pushed the original native formula in as the old, the P&G variant sold out at Target. And so that was a real learning experience because, we walked in sort of thinking, P&G can do no wrong when it comes to formula production. And, I walked out being like, I can see why direct-to-consumer startups can win against P&G. There is, we understand consumers, we have better data, and, 3 guys in a room that have been at this at 30 years may not yield the best possible formula that, a direct-to-consumer startup can sell.
For sure. You really have seen it from the inside. So you said 2.5 years running native, and then you stayed at P&G for how long?
Another 2.5 years. It was actually a little less than 2.5 years before we sold the business, and a little less than 2.5 years before I left.
And then how long have you been outside, unconnected from native?
1 year now.
1 year.
just 1 year now. So I left at the end of last year. Like January 31st or so was my last day at Native of 2020.
Now that you've had like, a year outside of it and you've had some time actually to look back on this journey, like, why do you feel like you guys were so successful so quickly? Looking at it from like maybe a consultant's point of view now, like looking back on that, what are some of the things that you have kind of held on that you realize that's the reason why we grew so fast?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of reasons, like, right place, right time to some extent, right category where, I used to tell people who were doing Facebook advertising, I was like, look, 95% of Americans use deodorant. So even if we advertise to someone and it doesn't get to the person we want to get to, we still advertise to someone who uses deodorant. So it's like hard for us to miss when it comes to advertising. I think like, if I were a consultant, what I would say is that we did a great job. Peter Thiel always has this question and he's like, what do you believe that most other people don't believe? And to me, like my answer to that would be data is overrated. Like the data from the market segment that we were pursuing was like, Tom's of Maine was dominating the natural deodorant category, but the category itself was $30 million in total. $30 million of natural deodorant sold a year. And we're like, look, none of this kind of stuff matters to us. People use deodorant. People should be using natural deodorant. We think that there's nobody in the market that's doing a good job. There's not the way when I remember thinking about the category and I was like, I want a natural deodorant and I can't think of a single name natural deodorant that I want to buy. Like I can't think of a single one sort of before Native started. If someone said, hey, you want to buy a cell phone? I'd be like, yeah, are you buying like Samsung or Apple? If someone said, do you want to buy a car? You can think of a dozen different names. If someone said, do you want to buy a bottle of water, a soda, juice, kombucha, you can think of a dozen different names that sort of resonate with you. In the natural deodorant category, I couldn't think of anything that like any brand actually. And so I was like, this category must be like a ripe opportunity. And so we started, and I think a lot of people, I remember one time we tried to raise money. The partner at the fund that we were trying to raise money from was like, walked into the room and was like, this is a $30 million category. What the hell am I doing in here? And I was like, probably shouldn't take a meeting with me if you're already preconceived, think that it's a $30 million category and don't want to invest. Like, just say no to the meeting. But more importantly, I was like, we're doing $30 million in revenue ourselves at this point. So if this is a $30 million category, I'm 100% of it, and that can't possibly be the case. And, today Native is certainly north of 100 million. It's probably 150 to 175. And so like, it's a meaningful business. We grew the entire category. We're 5x larger than the category was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And so I think we did a lot right when it came to like resonating with consumers and talking to consumers about what they cared about, which was ingredients and efficacy. We didn't like, if you go to Native, I think there's an About Us page now. There was no About Us page prior to 2020. Like while I was there, I was like, no one cares about me and no one should care about me. This product is good because it's got good ingredients and it works. And that's what we really emphasize. We didn't emphasize all of the other stuff. Even if you look at PR, from a PR perspective, there's virtually nothing about Native as a business until after the acquisition. Before the acquisition, like we did one article where like they asked me about how we started Native, and I was like, it doesn't even matter how we started. Look at our ingredients, look at our reviews, look at our efficacy. That's what we should be talking about. Like that's why we're going to win this. And I think that's what it was. We were focused on product and consumer, and not like business or ourselves.
From an outside looking in, one of the things I've always admired about the way that you guys did your marketing and the way you guys built the business was it was it was and is very simple, right? There was not many pages on your website. I think it was like you get there, you look at it, you add it to cart, and you make a purchase. And one thing that's interesting that stands out to me, especially with your story about this is only a $30 million category. Well, what is always going to be true? Like people are going to use deodorant and they're going to prefer a deodorant that has fewer ingredients, right? Like in the future, as people become more aware. And that thing it's very interesting to see how you've pulled the entire category in that direction. There's been a lot more people that have showed up,
Definitely.
and grown in that way.
Definitely. We were super simplistic about it as well. So sorry to interrupt you. Like I remember when I was creating the product page, like I was the only employee at the company for a year. So I like designed the site and I was like creating the product page and I put our deodorant, put an image of our deodorant with all of the ingredients to the left and the right. And then I was like, wow, I wonder what should go after this. Like what should, like, should we delve into each of the ingredients individually? And then I was like, no, fuck it. Like that's it. All you need to know is that we have fewer ingredients, and here are the ingredients we have, and you can read them. And here are reviews of customers saying it works. And that's it. We're about ingredients and efficacy. And if you add those two things together, you can create a winning business.
Yeah, it's interesting because the only thing that really matters in somebody's mind, right, is if you're making the decision for a deodorant, it's like, well, does it work? If it has less ingredients, does it work? That's like the sticking point, and all the reviews on that side of thing.
Yeah, that definitely.
What I was going to say is one thing I've noticed because I purchased the deodorant before. One of the things I thought was so interesting is you guys have a little. You had, I don't know if you still have it, a travel upsell.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
I'll tell you what, like, I'm not sure it was entirely, like, somebody was talking to me about post-purchase upsells. It might have even been Ezra at like, when he had the one-click upsell.
Yeah.
And we were on WooCommerce at the time. So I was like, wow, this is a phenomenal idea. And, we offer free shipping and free returns. And like we can make the business work. I mean, it's hard to make a $12 price product, $12 product work with free shipping. But we made it work. Like people loved the product. Our CAC was low. Things were going in the right direction. But we couldn't do that with a travel size deodorant. We couldn't be like, yeah, buy a travel size deodorant for, $3 and it's free shipping. Like the deodorant costs money, the shipping costs money, the pick and pack, like all of that, the math just wouldn't work. And, the number one most requested thing we had was I want a travel size. Deodorant, it's weird because deodorant's small enough that, it's under 3 ounces and you can certainly take it with you, but no one wants to give up that space in their, DOP kit or whatever it is. And so we created this travel size deodorant, which cost us under $1, including the plastic. And we're like, look, this is fantastic. And we used it a little while for as coupon codes. We're like, get a free travel size deodorant with purchase. And then we're like, look, we're not always going to have this coupon code. We built the post-purchase upsell. And, at one point there were like 40% of people were taking it. The margins were insane. We were shipping you a box anyway. It didn't it didn't even take the box from it took the box from like 7 ounces to 8 ounces. But the price that we were paying for postage on 7 and 8 ounces was the exact same. So it didn't cost us more from a postage perspective. The margin on it was like 70%. It was just a phenomenal upsell. And, we'd be selling $1 million of travel size deodorants a month, generating, $600,000, $700,000 in EBITDA from the travel size deodorant alone. And it was really it was a really great upsell, and really, it didn't make the business or break the business, but it did allow us to realize a lot more opportunity. It increased our AOV. It wasn't cannibalizing our existing sales, and it gave us a ton more profit because we were able to sell you a $3 product, which was really cheap, and get that to you without much cost to us. And so it was phenomenal for the business.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was really well executed. And I went to my wife's parents' house, and her father's bought, I don't know how many native deodorants, but there's travel size stuff everywhere. I always see them in the bathroom.
Sure.
I would love to hear, you mentioned 8 people was kind of at the end when you sold the business, you were 8 people. What were their roles, and what was your relationship with agencies to be able? Was that help you scale, or how did you work between those two?
So we had 8 people. 5 were in customer service. 1 was in ops. 1 me. So that's like 7 of them. And then there was another person who sort of helped me do a bunch of the marketing. So for instance, I would create all the emails and send them out. But I'd want another set of eyes on emails to make sure that the links worked and that I didn't spell native with, 2 E's or something to that effect. And so those were the 8 people right there. 5 customer service, ops, me, and a person helping me with the marketing side of things. That was the composition of the team. I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question? Did
you engage with a lot of agencies? Like, what was your relationship with agencies at that level? Was that something that you had to have, or what is your experience with agencies?
Sure. Agencies, generally my experience is bad. And There's very few agencies where when I see their bill on my credit card statement at the end of the month, I'm not like, I should fire these guys. I'm almost always like, I need to fire these guys and I need to look up how much notice I have to give them because in 60 days, this is not like, I'm not going to pay this again. When we switched to Shopify, we used an agency and I had a really terrible experience with them. They charged $50,000 a month, which was, $35,000 more than they should be charging. They were slow. They didn't deliver when they should have. And I'd never use them again. I personally ran all the Facebook ads at Native. So, I've spent $60-75 million on Facebook ads myself. I did the creative. I did the, ad running. I actually went into Ad Manager, did the campaigns, ad sets, and ads. And so, didn't use I've seen a bunch of agencies take credit for running our Facebook ads. And, usually I don't say anything, but I'm like, I know you didn't, because I didn't even give it to anybody else on the team. I personally ran it until, 5 months before I left the company. So for 5 years, I was doing it for about 4.5. We did use an agency for Google Ads though. And I feel like the one place that it's really, what was difficult for me is, or like what I found is very few people are good at Facebook ads and Google ads. Like they're two very different animals.
Yeah, they're distinct.
Yeah, like one is intent-based and what isn't. And I was good at Facebook ads, and that's where the majority of our spend was. I couldn't figure out how to run a Google ad for the life of me. It seemed like it was a completely different animal. And so we hired an agency for Google ads. And that was, a fine experience. We were probably spending $50,000 a month, so it wasn't a ton of money. But I also didn't want to lose the search term when people search for native. I didn't want to be below Tom's of Maine and Secret and all of those guys. And so we did use an agency for that. By the time after we sold, there were P&G is full of agencies. And a couple of years ago, they had a new theme, which was put your hands on the keyboard. Don't just call up people and use an agency to do work. Run your own Facebook ads, see what that's like. The hard part is I don't think anyone there is sort of given a credit card to run Facebook ads with. But for us, I really had the belief that we had to do things internally. And if we couldn't do it internally, it probably wasn't worth doing. And so we tried to limit the use of agencies as much as possible.
Do you think that contributed to the amount of simplicity that the business had, was just the limited the number of people that are involved with it and you being tied to it even at the last part of it?
It definitely contributed to simplicity, and it makes the sale a lot easier because when you're going to sell your business, the buyer's like, wow, all of the intelligence and IP around creating ads and running them is in-house and not outsourced to a separate agency, which means you guys know what you're doing and that intellectual capital is there. And I think that's a valuable asset when you're trying to exit the business. Yeah, I think it made the business a lot simpler. I think we focused on what we were good at, but at the same time, I think there were probably costs to that as well. Like we probably could have created a better brand, or we could have done more advertising and more distinct advertising. We could have used other channels that we didn't because I didn't have the bandwidth to explore them. And so I think there's pros and cons as with anything. Like the benefit is that it's a simple business. You know what you're doing and what you're doing really well. And you're there's no agency cost. On the flip side of the coin, you're not in as many channels as you could be, at a time when, advertising is a lot cheaper than it is today.
Well, I think that segues well to my next question, which is I saw on Twitter, I think you posted a little while, I don't know, maybe a week or two ago. I don't know how long ago it was. I saw it on Twitter. You're like, I'm hungry to get back involved with something, right? Hungry to get back involved with some e-commerce.
That's right.
What, if you were to start over today, right? What's the biggest difference that you see right now between when you guys started 5-6 years ago? And you mentioned ad costs, but what's the biggest difference, and how would you approach it differently today?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure I would approach it significantly differently. Ad costs are up, but they're not up 300% where these businesses don't make sense any longer through digital ads. I would approach a lot of the product making in the same way that I did, which is launch with the best product that you can make and hope to make it better as you grow. And, I see a lot of brands doing that. I think we talk about it a lot, but, I've read articles where Tuft & Needles, we've made 30 different versions of our mattress to make the one we have today. I've heard Casper do the same thing. I've heard Allbirds do the same thing. I've heard Imi, which is selling a ramen noodles, doing the same thing. Most direct-to-consumer brands are trying to improve their product. We're sort of vocal about it, while others may not be. So certainly on that side, I would do the same thing. The one thing that I would do differently, and this is easy to say from the position that I've got today, is I would have a lot more ambition. I think like when we were selling the business, I was like, how much larger can this business grow? Like we were selling only on our website. We were not selling in Target or on Amazon or anywhere else at the time. And a rumor was that like 5% of deodorants, or about $50 million worth of deodorants, were being sold on the internet at the time. And we were all of it, like all of the deodorants being like, we outsold Amazon when it came to deodorants, 3-1 when we were on top of our game and not on Amazon. And so I think that I was like, how much further can we grow this business? This is insane. And I guess I didn't have the faith or the confidence that I have today, or frankly, also the balance sheet to be able to be like, I can withstand a business going sideways. And today I'd be like, you know what? We're not going to sell this to P&G. We're going to be the next P&G. Everyone get the fuck out of my way. Today I'd have a lot more of that ambition. And in part, it's because I've seen Native grow and do really well in store. And in part because I've seen other brands do far better than I think people would have imagined. Look at Allbirds really crushing it in the shoe space when I think everyone was like,
Yeah.
how are you going to compete with the Nikes of the world? Look at Away Travel. Sort of, pre-pandemic, people were like, this brand is taking over the world. Like a lot of brands sort of didn't accept that there was a ceiling on their growth, like a natural ceiling on their growth. And I think, I was a little timid and did. And next time I feel like I won't make that same mistake.
I'd heard when I was researching that you did raise some money for Native, but it was like a very small amount, like a couple $100,000, right?
Yeah. So we raised $50,000 in the first 3 months of the business, and then $250,000 within the next year. So that was $300,000. We raised another $200,000 within the last 4 months of selling. Even when we were in a sale process, to be honest, we raised a little bit of money, not because we needed it. When we sold the business, we had about $12 million in cash on the balance sheet. It was a very profitable business. But we were talking to people that I really liked, and I wanted to I wanted to have them as part of the journey of Native, and I wanted to be friends with them later on and all of those things. And so we raised $200,000, virtually when we were selling the business, we raised $200,000.
What have you learned about raising money, and would you approach another next company differently? Would you raise money for it? How do you think about that? I think it can be polarizing for people. Some people are like, bootstrap only, it's the only way to do it. Other people are like, you got to raise money. How do you think about it?
Yeah, great question. I really like how you framed it. I don't think there's a single easy answer. If I was Jeff Bezos' son, I would not have raised money. If I was Bill Gates' son, I would not have raised money. I would have been like, don't worry, we can fund all of the inventory we ever need by ourselves. So I think it's a really personal decision. And, I had the benefit of having sold a previous e-commerce business. And so I didn't need to take a salary, at least for a few years. And that also made it a lot easier to not raise money, because I was like, you know what, I can go 2 years, 5 years without having to take any cash off the balance sheet. And so that makes it a lot easier. And I recognize that's like a position of privilege. And so I think everyone has a different story. What's been wonderful is seeing a bunch of direct to consumer businesses now avoid raising money. I think Movement Watches, Tuft & Needle, and us were real pioneers in not raising money and having successful direct to consumer businesses. And now you see a ton more of those businesses, a ton more people operate businesses like that. And it's fantastic to see. And what's also amazing is just outcomes are better. I'm not sure if they're better or easier or a combination of both for everyone. When we sold the business, my family was a 90-some% shareholder of Native. And so it was a significant exit for me. While if we had raised $45 million and there was a ton of pref and liquidation preferences, it would have been a lot harder for the exit to be as meaningful.
Sure.
Michael Dubin maybe is one of the greatest pioneers in e-commerce. And, from everything I've heard, Native was a more successful outcome for me than Dollar Shave Club was from him, even though he built a much larger business. And it was a lot easier. Our business was 2.5 years old. small business and still acquired by a big CPG company. And since then, P&G told me, look, it was the first acquisition in like the last 2 decades at P&G that has met acquisition economics. Like we were beating our revenue projections and forecasts that we provided. And so they were super happy with the acquisition. We were super happy with the acquisition. The small investors that we had were super happy with the acquisition. They earned, 20x their money in 18 months. So they didn't have anything to complain about either. And so
better than Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I think not raising a ton of money or being bootstrapped allows for a lot more exit opportunities that are a lot easier. I remember when we were thinking about raising money, there was a venture capitalist who told us, we'll write you a check for $30 million at a $300 million valuation, or a check for $3 million at a $30 million. In either case, we'll own 10%. You'll either get your business will either be valued at 30 million or 300. You can choose, Moiz. But if you choose 300, you have to work here until this thing exits for 750, 800. And if you choose 30, you can sell this thing for 80 and we'll all go home happy. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, you're offering me a valuation of 30 or 300. I get to pick the door that I walk through. And I was like, I don't know if I want to work here for 5
and very years. Different doors.
Very different doors, yeah. And so I was like, I don't know if I want to work here for 5 years. I don't know if I can make this an $800 million a year business. So I'm going to choose the other door. But the problem is I don't need $3 million. I've got $5 million. I don't know what to do with the 5. And so we're not going to raise any of the money that you offered. But it was really interesting to sort of experience the different types of valuations that you could get from venture capitalists.
That's a fascinating story. And I think I love getting kind of the behind the scenes about how things are working, because there's not many conversations about this that are open conversations. I would love to hear, how long did you actually prepare for the sale, or if you did prepare at all? And what does that actually look like? What meetings do you have to go to? Who do you have to talk to? How long does that take? And what should people think about if they're in a position that they know they want to sell their business in the next couple of years? What should they start thinking about today?
Great question. And I think there are different answers based on the size and scope of your business. If you're a $1 million Amazon retailer, you're going to sell your business in 6 weeks when you go to market to one of the guys from, who's buying businesses off Quiet Light Brokerage. And, your process will be much faster and more streamlined than ours is. If I was planning on selling my business in the next 2 years, what I would try and do is button up things like my finance. I'd be like, let me get my financial statements audited by a third party so that everybody trusts that the numbers that I'm providing them are accurate. The other thing that I would think about that not enough e-commerce entrepreneurs do is estate taxes and tax planning. You can either increase the size of your business 20%. You can sell your business for 10 million or 12 million, and you'll earn $2 million, or you can just save $2 million in taxes. You could be like, what, I'm going to sell my business in 2 years. Maybe San Francisco, California, or New York City, New York are not the best places to sell my business. And I've been thinking about moving to Austin in the next 18 months. Maybe I should accelerate that time period now. Because that'll save you a fortune in money. But really what I would do is I'd go to a tax planner or an estate planner and try and manage those taxes so that I had to not just pay as little as I have to now and minimize my taxes today, but also set up estates so that my children can benefit from the sale of this company without a ton of inheritance taxes. So I would do all of those things. It goes without saying that I try to maximize revenue for the next 2 years and maximize EBITDA, because those are how you're going to buy and sell businesses. From a sale perspective for us, what happened is someone came knocking on our door in February 2017. At first we didn't take the knock too seriously, and then it got louder, and the company was a legitimate buyer that had, more than $1 billion in revenue. And so we're like, okay, we have to take this seriously. And as we sort of started talking to them, we're like, look, if we're going to sell a deodorant business, we should probably talk to the people who sell 85% of the deodorants in the United States, and that's P&G and Unilever, and to a lesser extent Edgewell. And so we hired an investment banker and talked to the private equity guys that you'd probably recognize in the space, and the consumer brands that you'd recognize in the space. It's about a 6 month process. You send them presentations, like a 100-page presentation about your company. They say we're interested or we're not. If we're interested, this is sort of the range of prices that we'd be interested in. And you say, yeah, that's a good range. Or this guy offered me $10 million for my business. We don't need to go any further with that guy. You invite him in, you meet him face to face, and then you sort of like say, okay, what's the number that you actually want to pay for this business? And you negotiate and sign documents. It's not like, I think one of the surprising things is I probably met the P&G guys 3 times before we actually signed documents and sold the business. Like, not a lot. And, 3 times, once for 4 hours, once for like 6 hours, and once for like a shorter period of time than that. So like not a ton. And really like, what you really want to create is an advocate for yourself inside their decision-making body. Like you want someone on their team to be like, we need this business and here's why. And sometimes it's your vision. Sometimes it's the business itself. Sometimes it's their business sort of going sideways and understanding that they need an injection of new talent and new brands. And I think we were sort of a combination of all of those things that made the deal happen.
How did you manage all that while running Facebook ads? Or did you at the end give this thing up? Because that I find this, I've had this conversation with so many e-commerce entrepreneurs that are like in the marketing seat where they're in there every day trying to like grind Facebook ads. What was your day like? Were you just not sleeping? Were you awake for 6 months? How did that work?
Yeah, you definitely sleep a lot less, and you're far more irritable. Like I remember being quite irritable at the time, and people would be like, our customer service team would be like, "Hey, this customer's got a problem," and like in my head, I'm like, "I'm trying to sell this business, and you're worried about a tracking number. Like, solve this issue." In reality, they did a phenomenal job, like handling everything. I think like people will say, "I'm gonna try and sell this business, and if I don't get the number I want, I'm just gonna continue operating the business as is." That's a great idea, but the reality is that like trying to sell a business is pretty consuming, and it's hard to do that and manage Facebook ads. And I bet if you looked at it, our ROAS went down like in October 2017, right before we sold the business, because there was like my attention was really on the acquisition. Still profitable, still good ROAS, just not as good as it could have been. I think that like, anyone who tells you that they're able to balance both really easily is lying to you. You can't do it. Like at some point, people like it's not just like the meetings that you have with these guys. It's the diligence request list. Like there was a company that asked us for every single email that we'd ever sent in the life of the business, the open rate, click-through rate, and the revenue generated from that email. And like that is a huge diligence. We didn't provide that. I was like, look, if you think you need that level of information on a business that's 2.5 years old, you're not ready to buy this business. We didn't provide that, and it wasn't P&G. But like, that's a really encompassing sort of request. And if you want to fulfill all of those requests, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of focus, and you're sort of strategizing with your team, yourself, your family, your estate planner, all of those guys. And all of a sudden your attention is 80% on the acquisition. There was definitely a point during the process where I was like, this business is going to get sold. I'm not going to be the owner of this business in the next 30 days. I don't know who is going to be that owner, but I know it won't be me. And that really changes your mindset too.
In what way? In what way? How did your mindset change?
Yeah. I think you're like, one, like I got to get this deal done. And so now I should spend less time focusing on Facebook ads and sending out emails and doing customer service and making sure I get this deal done. Because, in part it's your incentives and in part it's the right thing to do. If you focus on Facebook ads and don't get the deal done, the acquirer doesn't care about what your Facebook ad performance is. He doesn't get the benefit of the company. And so I think you're like, these keys belong to somebody else. In the same way that if you like sold your house and you were like renting it for a month, you're like, I'm going to maintain it as best I can because I love this place. But at the same time, I recognize it's somebody else's house and I want to prepare for that transition. And in part, like, P&G, and like by the time we were deep with P&G, they were like, hey, look, this is the direction we're going to take the business. We were sort of stepping on the gas with oral care and ready to launch a toothpaste right when we sold. And they're like, we need you to not do that right away. And so, we started even changing the way the business was going to operate before we signed the documents.
It's really interesting. Yeah. I like that kind of visual of living in somebody else's house that they've bought, like how you would treat it and thinking a little bit differently than when you're all in, right? And you've got massive skin in the game. I think it's so interesting. I like having this conversation with entrepreneurs, you mentioned that you'd sold, was it Caskers? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Beforehand. And so you were able to not pay yourself for a while and like go all in on the business. What advice do you have to entrepreneurs who haven't yet sold something or don't have that financial runway to be able to not pay themselves? How should they think about it, or how would you think about it if they're in that position?
Yeah, I think that like you've got to do what's best for you and your family, and everyone has such a different position. Like, if I was 21 years old and starting an e-commerce business and didn't have a family, and like it was okay eating, cup noodles every day, like I did when I was 21, I'd be like, let's raise as little money as possible. Let me fund the life I need to put a roof over my head and have an internet connection and see how I can grow this business. On the flip side of that coin, if I was 38 and I had a kid who was about to go to I guess you wouldn't have a kid who was about to, say I was 44 and a kid about to go to college or needed a car or something, I'd be like, what? I might need to raise money and be able to buy a house and have a lot more financial security for the stability of my family and the happiness of my family. And that's a responsibility that I have as a husband and as a father and as a human being. And so I think it's really difficult to sort of give blanket advice. I do think that what I would say is I would listen to your gut. I think the one thing I realized when I was running Native is a lot of people were giving me lots of different pieces of advice. People would be like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I think this is how you should operate the business. And I was just like, you know what? I live and breathe this business. I appreciate that you're giving me advice and thinking, spending time thinking about my business. But you're going to think about it for the next hour and a half or the next 90 minutes. I'm thinking about this business every waking moment that I'm alive. And, I know the details of it far greater than the details of things. And so I trust you got to the point that you're at because you did something right and you trusted yourself and made decisions that you believed in and executed and had a great work ethic. Don't stop listening to yourself as you get up to the precipice of an exit or fundraising. You're right more often than not. And listening to other people's advice is great, but you're in a different set of circumstances. And so I listened to everyone's advice that I could, but ultimately I wanted to be the coach of my own team and sort of call my own play.
Now, I mean, you've been in the e-commerce space for a while and you've got a lot of experience.
I'm a dinosaur.
Right. And it's, what's a myth that you would like to dispel in our space, in the e-commerce space?
Yeah, great question. I'll dispel a few. One, that Shopify is the best. I'm long on Shopify. I don't think Shopify is the best e-commerce platform. Two is you can't build businesses running performance ads any longer. I see it all the time. And the reality is the reason you don't see it is the people who are running them are making so much money. They're not fundraising. They're not exiting their business. They're just driving Lamborghinis, in Beverly Hills. And so I think you can do that. And three, I think that a lot, there is no right path. Fundraising, great. You want to build a brand, you want to build a brand, that makes a ton of sense too. Native is what it is now today, not because of performance advertising. That day is past a long time ago. It is a brand today because of the customers that love it and the social assets and the feedback that we get and the culture that we have. And there's that way to build a brand, and there's a way to build a brand where you're just running performance ads. There's a way to build a brand where you raise a ton of VC money and have a beautiful office. And there's a way to build a brand where you sit at home or at a WeWork and do everything yourself. All of those are great ways. And, there's sometimes a lot of shame of sort of sitting. I remember I felt a little ashamed of myself. I was a lawyer and now I'm working in a co-working space that smells pretty bad. And at night I'm sort of going home and packing boxes. And now I look at it and I'm like, all of those things have become badges of honor. And I think that when people put you down for that, they're really wrong. And so when you see people who are buying new offices and hiring a ton of people, often that's a house of cards and you should run the brand that you want to run. Well,
we saw when COVID hit, a lot of those benefits of having the office became a massive liability, right? Very, very quickly.
Yeah, that's right.
I go in, I have an office a co-working space that I go to and I walk to, and it's hilarious. It just opened up. It's 5 minutes from me. It's got room for maybe 500. For most of COVID, there was 5 people there. I was one of them. And It's like, but they have 60 or 70% rented out. So they're doing okay, but none of the, all these businesses are just paying for them. You said one of your beliefs is that Shopify is not the best platform. What is the best platform? And is that a nuanced question for you? Yeah,
no,
WooCommerce.
That's not a nuanced question. Yeah, not even close. I don't even like, and don't get me wrong. I think my largest publicly traded company position is in Shopify. I'm bullish on their future because I think everyone's using them. Warren Buffett always says he wants to invest in businesses like Coca-Cola that can raise prices and people don't stop buying it because they love the product so much. I think that is Shopify. Yeah. People are in it and like deep in it. And so like, it's not easy, for instance, Native is on it. Native can't get out easily. Like the fees are super expensive. The app, by the time we were running the business, first we were paying $50,000 a month in developer fees. We were paying, probably another $25,000 to $30,000 a month between Shopify, Recharge, and all of the apps that we were running. Like that's $75,000 a month to keep your website going. Prior to that, we were paying $950 a month to keep our website going. Like, wow. It was just an insane difference. And so, I'm bullish on cheaper options than that, not options where you sort of can't control your own destiny. The other thing is like, for instance, the post-purchase upsell, we were able to build that on WooCommerce because it's open source and you can control your own destiny with it. You can't do that as easily on Shopify as like, Cardhook is experienced and as I think one-click upsell is experienced. And so I'm bullish on fees
as well. There were fees there as well.
Yeah.
To even convert
the worst
those.
Part is, it's fees on like revenue. It's not like it's $50 a month. Yeah. They're like, oh, it's 1% of all revenue generated from this, and you're like, why is this software eating up? Imagine your customer service platform was like, hey, the more revenue you sell, or like the more you sell, the more we're gonna charge you 1% of revenue for customer service. Like, you're like, where are you coming from? That's how I felt.
Yeah, I saw that you and your brother started Ali Capital.
That's right.
I would love to hear like, what are you excited about? Why did you start it? How excited are you about it? And what are the things that you're looking to do and achieve with this?
Yeah, it's my favorite type of investing, or my favorite VC fund is ironically my own, because we have no mandate. We're just like, we're going to invest in companies when we find something fantastic. It's not our full-time job. So if we see nothing good for 6 months, we'll deploy zero capital for 6 months. And if we see something fantastic in, if we see 5 things that are great in 30 days, we're going to write 5 different checks. And so I really like that because there's no pressure as opposed to a bunch of these other funds, particularly like rolling funds where I'm like, you guys are trying to deploy $1 million every quarter. Whether or not you see good deals, you're going to be deploying that capital. And like, I don't love that business model. I guess I like to do 2 things with it. One is invest in e-commerce businesses that I think are going to do really well and like founders that are fantastic. So we invest in things like Manscaped and Buffy, Magic Spoon, Liquid IV, which is sold to Unilever, a bunch of other Pepper, which is like a smaller company that sells women's underwear, Smalls, which is like a cat food company. We've invested in a bunch of different types of companies where I really like the founder, really like the category. And one other thing that I probably don't believe, like I care more about product than I do about founder generally. Like if Mark Zuckerberg comes to me and he's like, hey, I'm going to sell dirt in a plastic bag, I'm going to be like, I don't really love that idea. So I care a lot about product and category, and maybe as much as I do about founder. And then like we've invested in a lot of direct consumer SaaS companies. So Postscript, which enables you to send text messages for e-commerce, like Klaviyo, but for text messages. Gorgeous, which is like Klaviyo, but customer service. And so a bunch of businesses that are geared towards making your e-commerce site better and friendlier and easier to use from a marketing perspective. And so I guess those are the 2 buckets that I think of. That's not to say that I wouldn't invest in a different type of product or non-e-commerce or non-e-commerce SaaS businesses. But those are the ones that I understand really well and tend to write bigger checks into.
Well, and the product side of things where you value product over founder, or, what you're talking about, it's so interesting in this space because you can see when a product connects with an audience so fast. It's like overnight, they're doing $1 million a month because they had a product that people already are familiar with, and they've created a version of it that they can just tap into. It's like the magic spoon, keto cereal type thing. Everyone wants cereal. It's so quick and it can explode. Doesn't matter who the founder is.
Everyone wants to eat 2 bowls of cereal a day, and no one wants to get fat doing it. And Magic Spoon, you're absolutely right. And these guys were fantastic founders. They had created another cricket protein company. Like, they lived and breathed. Like, they're not poser keto, they're genuine keto. But like, and they're great founders. But you're absolutely right. Like, you saw the category, and you're like, yeah, of course, I want to walk down the cereal aisle. And like, the Kashis of the world are complete bullshit. Of course, I want something that's healthy for me and edible. And so would my nephews. And so like, it just made a ton of sense.
One of my new favorite quotes: "The Kashis of the world are complete bullshit."
Yeah, that is complete bullshit. Like, they've got like, they look beautiful, they look healthy, they've got like all the colors of being healthy, and you're like, I know this is owned by General Mills and full of a bunch of sugar, or like Kellogg and full of a bunch of sugar, and it's complete bullshit. So yeah, like the Magic Spoon is the real deal.
Earlier, I said, I saw one of your tweets. You said you want to get back in the game and get back in the e-commerce game. What excites you right now? What categories, what things are you thinking about when you're looking at potentially getting either buying or starting something back up?
Yeah, I think a lot of I think the Thracios of the world excite me, like, conglomerates that are buying a bunch of smaller direct-to-consumer brands and leveraging their shared resources to build larger brands. Because at some point, no, I don't know any business that's gone to, $500 million on the back of Facebook ads. Like, Facebook ads do have a limit. And so the only way to go beyond that is to like have other alternative sources of revenue or marketing channels. And so, the guys who are like the Thracias of the world that share those resources among brands is fantastic. A lot of I really like the telemedicine space. Like, I'm really impressed with the Hims and Hers of the world. I think they've done a fantastic job. And I think that there's a lot more room in a lot of other different categories for that type of space, for that type of business to grow. Going to the doctor is like a ridiculous, I used to like take Ambien when I went on long flights, and I'd go to the doctor and I'd be like, I want Ambien. And they'd be like, here's the prescription. And I'm like, I had to come here, like get in a car, come here, waste 30 minutes, pay a copay. You didn't ask a single question. You wrote me a prescription. This is a waste of everyone's time. Like, I should just be able to, I should be able to go to CVS and get this, but because I can't, I should be able to like go through a Hims and Hers app to do it. So I'm really bullish about that type of space. I think it's still like we've just scratched the surface of it.
Yeah, it's a great example. I think I saw Judge Judy is like the highest paid person. Yeah. That most of that must just come from doctor's office. People sitting there in the doctor's office waiting.
You're probably right. Yeah, and that's always on.
I want to wrap up here, but I've got one last question for you, which is, if you were in my shoes, and what's a question that I should have asked you that I have not asked you?
Great question. I think that's it. Right there is the question that you should ask me that you have not asked me. What is that question? I think it would be, I think they're like what were the keys to Native's early success? Like, how did we build a business early on that made it really successful? And I think the answer to that is a few things. One is we really listened to our consumers. Like, for instance, there was one of our earliest customers is like, hey, I want to do a YouTube video about Native deodorant. Is that okay with you? And I was like, well, you don't even need to ask us. Why would you tell us about this? And she did it and got us like 40 sales when we were probably doing like 5 a day. And I was like, what is going on YouTube that we should be like paying attention to? Because this one woman posted a video and got us a ton of sales. And I think like paying attention to where traffic is coming from and what customers are talking about. Like, I saw this insane evolution on Facebook from what we were talking about on Facebook ads a long time ago, which was efficacy and product, and like sustainability. We never got one question about how much plastic does Native waste a year until like 2017, and by 2019 it was the most comment. The theme of the most comment in Facebook was how much, like, is this a sustainable brand? What are you doing towards sustainability? Wow. When are you guys going to get rid of plastic? And what's crazy is I like when I was doing Facebook ads, I'd be monitoring all of the comments. And at one point I was like, I need somebody else to monitor the comments because there's just hundreds a day. And I asked this person on our team to do it. And she's like, this is such low level work. Can I do something better? And I was like, look, first, I'm the CEO of the company and I'm doing it. So it's not that low level. And second, the amount of things that you will learn from these comments can drastically change the trajectory of our business and the direction of our business if you pay close enough attention and have good judgment. And so I think we did that really well early on. And then the other thing that we did well really early on was like hire fanatical employees. Like the employees that we hired were like lived and died by the brand, constantly talking about it, loved wearing native clothing. Love talking about the fact that they work there. Like when people were asking me when I'd go to a dinner party, what do you do? And I'm like, God, I'm gonna have to talk about deodorant all night now. They would love to. They would love to do that, you know. And like when I was like, hey, I want to do this thing that like sort of skirts a corner and makes my life a little bit easier. They're like, how could you do that? The brand doesn't stand for this. And they'd yell at me, and I'm like, okay, you're right. The brand doesn't stand for this, and we have to do the right thing here. And that type of temperature check was really fantastic, and made me made the brand much stronger. And so I think hiring employees that really love the brand and evangelize the brand is so incredibly important early on.
How did you find those people?
There was no magic to it. Like they, I think it was like in part that was their nature. Like, we advertised on LinkedIn, like actually probably Craigslist and like AngelList early on, but like they understood that they would be like the person who runs customer service at Native. She started out as a customer service agent, and she's just like, there's a huge vacuum. No one is like, Moiz, you're doing half the customer service. There's no rules to customer service. There's no templates or like framework. I'm going to create all of this. And she just kept usurping power week after week until everyone was like, obviously she's the head of customer service. Like there was a vacuum there, and she's taken up the space of that vacuum. Like we found people like that who just did it and like didn't ask questions and didn't wait for authority and seized it. And that was really phenomenal.
It's awesome. I mean, I've had a lot of success hiring off of Craigslist as well. Like it's fun. It's funny. People like joke about that. They're like, Craigslist. I'm like, no, I've hired a lot of people off of Craigslist, or, hire my mom even, which is it's hilarious. HireMyMom.com.
Sure.
Moiz, this has been fantastic.
I thought you meant you actually hired your mom.
No.
HireMyMom.com. Yeah.
But Moiz, it's been fantastic. I've had a lot of fun chatting with you. If people are interested, I know you've got your podcast, right, that you ran last year, which, so, what's funny is that I've had like 4 or 5 of my clients tell me that like, I listen to your podcast and Moiz's podcast. Those are my 2 favorite podcasts.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
But where would you send people to, I don't know, learn about what you're doing now and connect with you? It's the best place.
Sure. I'm on Twitter at Moiz Ali, and I'm on Instagram at moiz.r.ali. So those are the 2 best places. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm at moiz@moizali.com.
Follow Moiz on Twitter. You'll get some hot takes. Some unpopular opinions, and some.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of unpopular opinions.
Awesome, man. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for hopping on here and joining me.
Really appreciate it. Thanks, Austin.